following program is paid for by Stephen K. Media.
Welcome to BBB Straight Talk with Dan Parsons, a weekly show on bad, good, and better business. Here we'll discuss scams and schemes to helpful business tips, and we'll feature guests from the BBB and leaders of accredited businesses, experts in our community, and the consuming public. Now here is your host, Dan Parsons.
Good afternoon. This is Jordan Rosado of the BBB. You're listening to Straight Talk. You'll note that today Dan Parsons is not with us. We are Danless. We are sans Dan, no Dan. So that means I'm solo. I'm Han Solo. And that means that Joe Nichols is my Wookiee. Today we're going to be talking about cloud computing, and I notice the clouds are rolling in today. Is that ominous or apropos? Those are my 2 50-cent words for the day, so I'm up to $1 now. Today we've got Nate Richards, president of Entrance Software. And we also have Steve Winter, president and CEO of Ergos Technologies. Welcome.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Great to have you. Cloud computing, we're hearing more and more about it on TV, on online articles. I saw several articles today just going through Google News. There's new partnerships being developed. I think HP just did something today, or the past couple, Microsoft and HP got something going. They put a lot of money into that. And so we're going to be hearing a lot more about it. I know that. And so I'll leave this open to either one of you want to start. If you want to kind of give us a definition, and I think this is kind of like baseball describing the infield fly rule. You know, every baseball fan thinks they have an understanding of it, but when pressed on it, then they kind of go, well, it's you see, you have to have this situation and that, and it becomes a little harder to describe. So without, trying to nail you down too much, how can you define cloud computing as it stands right now?
I mean, fundamentally, cloud computing is about resources. So in the past, we've had really two key resources. One is storage, and the other one is compute, or the power to do things. And really, a computer, as we know it today, is really a machine that allows us to use those two resources. Cloud computing is really about the location of and access to those resources by a computer. And so it's really a paradigm shift of traditionally what we've thought of as a computer, and extending my desktop computer out into this sea of available resources, which is really what the cloud represents, is this sea of available resources.
So basically what we're able to do then is, instead of the traditional model of what you're running, I've heard a description of cloud computing as beyond the firewall. Mm-hmm. And so whereas before you had your applications, your software that you're running on site, and you had to deal with all that, the upgrades, all those things, now it's out there in the cloud, basically, and other folks are taking care of the applications and such. Does that kind of sound right?
And the internet is the cloud. Mm-hmm. For all everyone knows of Gmail. That's cloud. People can, the email's hosted out there. You don't have to have anything in-house. All you need is an internet connection. Mm-hmm. And so just to your point, beyond the firewall, that is the cloud. And today, it's unlimited what you can find out in the cloud.
Right. And so basically, most of us, or a lot of us, have been doing this for a long time. Maybe this terminology is new, but we've all been using a lot of apps that live out there.
Doing a lot of our research on the internet. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to be an encyclopedia salesman anymore. It's in the cloud. It's out on the internet. And so that has been cloud computing. And what we're seeing now is commercial business is embracing it a lot more, especially here in Houston, Texas, because we had this gentleman named Ike come through not too long ago.
Right.
And people realized how, reliant we were upon our buildings and our offices and all that went within that, and people were out of power and left the city and all. Well, with the cloud, you can be anywhere as long as you have internet connection and you're up and running.
And so that brings up a good point. There's a lot of security issues that are improvements. I think also people might have some concerns about security, but we'll touch on that in a minute because I wanted to kind of go through just a brief history of how it kind of got to be where we are, if either one of you wanted to take that.
Well, where it's grown tremendously is with the advent of high-speed internet. It was tough because in the past, if you wanted to put something out in the cloud, but it took you 10 minutes to download it, well, that was a problem. You couldn't effectively use the cloud. Now with broadband, we're getting unbelievable speeds now, and stability of service, all those types of things. We don't have the old days when we were trying to dial up into AOL and you didn't know if you were going to get through or not.
Right.
Now it's, like the telephone, it's on and it works all the time. And so applications are out there, and so the ability's been there for a long time. Now the bandwidth is caught up, and so the ability to access these applications and run them virtually in the cloud and all the new tool sets that are around it. The other thing that's happened, too, is just all of the technology behind it has gotten to be a lot less expensive, and how we can, if you ever heard of the old application service provider model, ASP was a buzzword, and everyone thought that was going to be the rave 5 or 6 years ago. The challenge with that was you had basically one environment that everyone had to kind of share from.
Right.
Today, with virtualization and all the capabilities that are available, now we can basically build a custom environment. Email's a pretty simple application, and we can all be on a shared platform and be carved off and be secured from each other and use that. But when you get into line of business applications or customization around a company's particular needs, now we can do mass customization where we can give someone their own divided environment out in the cloud at a very competitive price.
So is that really the difference now, is this being able to customize so much, whereas ASP was what it was and everybody just had to deal with it even though it was out there, but now is the difference now that you can customize so much and make it your own and individualize it?
Well, that was it. In the ASP model, the problem with some of it was you still had to have local infrastructure sometimes because you were running something unique that you couldn't run it because everyone else couldn't have it, or it just didn't run well. It didn't play well in the sandbox with everyone else. Now we can give everyone their own sandbox out in the cloud. And so there's, again, not every application you get into CAD design and some of those is not the best to be out in the cloud, but your typical business user can be hosted in a great environment.
And that's just because CAD's so demanding.
It is, and so graphic intensive, and you need a lot of graphic drivers, those types of things.
Right. Okay, and so since we're kind of defining things, software as a service, there's PaaS.
Platform as a service.
Right. Do you want to kind of get into that a little bit?
This is really less about, these two terms are less about hosting, so taking entire environments and taking them outside the firewall, and more about thinking about where we run our applications in a different way. So fundamentally, another difference that I would add to what Steve was saying about how the ASP model has changed and become really what we know as the cloud today, is that these resources that I was talking about are available rather than at the server level. They're really down at the one piece of data or one running process level. So this software as a service is this idea of on-demand or as-needed resources. So if you need a CRM system, you can contact Microsoft CRM or Salesforce, and literally within hours you have a CRM system running for you and for your company.
Right.
And the other thing is the applications actually don't run inside your network, and they don't run on your server, but they run virtually and transparently to you. So it's literally that risk of, is someone going to pull out the plug, or am I going to get cut off? Those are risks that are now mitigated by the cloud and not by you. Part of the dollars that you spend there is to mitigate those risks.
Is Salesforce, that kind of seems like they were at the forefront. They really kind of have always been at the forefront bringing these changes around. How long have they been doing this, and how long have they been sort of treading the way?
If you look at the name of the company, Salesforce.com, you can really kind of get some idea about their roots. They started as a what we would call SFA, or Salesforce Automation Company, which was really about mobilizing companies' sales infrastructure and providing a data platform to manage all of that data, leads, accounts, opportunities, contracts, those types of things. But I think what you're getting at is that Salesforce realized that what they had was more than just a sales automation platform. What they had was a business automation platform. that could be, if they thought about it at a lower level in terms of, rather than a lead or an opportunity, now maybe you have a support. You're working customer support incidents.
Right.
Or you have invoicing. Or so Salesforce and a couple of other vendors realized that moving applications into the cloud and allowing people to create their own objects, to create their own business databases, if you will, in the cloud, and that their value was less about the Salesforce and more about the platform.
Right. Okay. It seems that besides Salesforce, there's a few names out there that are in the headlines, at least the online headlines right now. Amazon, and of course Microsoft. And from what I read about Amazon, what they're working with is a lot of flexibility is what they're pushing right now. That you can, for lack of a better term, balloon up in your resources and then shrink right back down to whatever you need at that particular time, which is, of course, incredibly valuable. Is that the way? Is that kind of their thing and where they're going?
Well, and what's happening, what we've seen, people have, we've talked about all this computing power that's sitting there idle. Everyone had all their own servers, and you might use 20% of the capacity. With the cloud and with Amazon now, you've got some companies that are doing massive computational analysis and those types of things, and they need to run these statistical analyses, and it may take a ton of computing power, and it's almost prohibitively expensive for them to buy it or maintain it. Well, with Amazon, they can rent it, and they run their computations, and they may run all night long, but it's for one day. And then they got what they need, and then they run it again later on or once a month maybe. But they only pay for the computing power when they need it to run that computation. So it saves them a tremendous amount of money, and they don't have to invest in all the infrastructure.
And that's really the value statement in it there, is that a company can sort of subscribe, if you will, and get the resources that they need at that time, and when they're done, they're done.
And that's what's happening with all of cloud computing from a business standpoint, especially in this economic environment. We're getting away from having the heavy capital expense and moving everything to an operational expense, per user per month. And, you don't have to go buy Microsoft Office. You can pay, $6 a month for the use of that license instead of having to go out and buy the application and worrying about upgrades. Again, it takes all the worry and every 3 or 4 or 5 years having to go and reinvest in all this infrastructure and cool it and store it and protect it and all those types of things. It's all out in the cloud, where they don't have to worry about it anymore. And when they want to upgrade from version 1 to version 2 of something, it's all they have to do is tell their service provider, yes, we want to upgrade, and it's done for them.
And I'd like to reiterate too that it really is a value statement there when you're dealing with the CFO, that the money that you're spending now can come out with cloud computing, can come out of operational expenses rather than spending a big chunk of money and buying some new software, installing it, all the expenses that go with that, the IT folks to manage it and all that. Now it comes out of operations, and I hate to keep going back to the word subscription, but it's a regular expense.
It's rent versus own, right? It's the flexibility of an apartment with the scalability of a mansion. So you can swap out and change. You have that flexibility, but you don't have the capital commitment, as Steve was saying, that you would with building out this large. Today you need a mansion, but tomorrow you only want to pay for an apartment. The cloud scalability and the on-demand nature, which you were just talking about, really is what enables businesses to do that.
Well, and the age-old question used to be, when we go to build an infrastructure is, well, where are you going to be 2 years from now? Because we had to build it for scale, and then if they didn't grow, it's wasted money and over-investment up front, but you had to do that because otherwise you're having to rebuild it all again. Right. Well, with the cloud, it doesn't matter whether you start off with 10 users or 50 users or 5,000 users.
And in this economy, the way it is right now, I'm sure you're running into situations where folks need a lot more flexibility because they just don't have the resources.
Yeah, imagine the small business that, their server just quit on them, or they're starting to have crashes. They're looking at spending several $1,000s to get another server, plus, their cousin IT guy coming in for the weekend to install it for them in the broom closet.
Right.
I mean, that's not an ideal situation, either from a money or from a risk perspective, when you have servers sitting in broom closets. But the cloud allows those people to spend probably less money but have a lot more resources for it,
Mm-hmm.
and also not be relying on the cousin IT guy
Right.
to show up to when it's not working.
Well, not to mention just the virtual workforce in general, too. You don't have to go and sign a lease because you got to have a server room and all these things that you need to have. You can have a disparate workforce across the country. All they need now is an internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
And they're connected and 3-digit transfers on phones and up and running.
Sure. Excellent. All right. Well, you've got BBB Straight Talk, and we are talking with Steve Winter, the president and CEO of Ergos Technology, and Nate Richards, president of Entrance Software. We're talking about cloud computing, and we'll be right back. And we're back with BBB Straight Talk, typically with Dan Parsons, but Dan is not in today, so you've got Jordan Razad. I'm the internet marketing guy at the BBB. And with us, we have Steve Winter, president and CEO of Ergos Technology, and Nate Richards, president of Entrance Software. And we're talking about cloud computing. And we were talking a bit about how, for lack of a better term again, it's subscription. In some instances, it's leasing. It's scalable. You can do many different things without having to host the technology on your own servers. It exists out there as you need it. And it looks like this is the way things are leaning now. And so looking forward in the future, as many of these companies are kind of merging and working on the same thing, we were just talking about between HP and Microsoft working together on a, $250 million over 3 years plan to develop. That's a lot of money. And I think a lot more are going to be doing the same thing. So in the future, what are we going to be looking at in the next, let's not go too far ahead, but 2 or 3 years?
I mean, today a lot of businesses can go and point at their server. They can walk in a room and say, that's my server there, or those are my servers. That's going to be an antiquated concept down the road. You won't have your server.
Right.
You'll have some virtual place in cyberspace, which is, the old word for the cloud, where things run and where things are stored.
Mm-hmm.
And as Steve was saying, with this ability to do virtualization, one hard drive fails, that's not because it's not your hard drive, your data is not gone.
Right.
Really, no one's data is gone because it's on many different hard drives all concurrently. And the cloud kind of manages that for you.
So what are companies going to need to have on site, though, as far as their hardware? What size pipe are they going to need?
I mean, today, too, the compression technology is so much better than what it used to be, plus bandwidth, obviously, is really improved. But, I mean, all they're going to need is an internet connection. And, I mean, simply...
And a screen.
Yeah, you hook a mouse, monitor, keyboard, and phone up, and you're done. All right? And that's basically it. So you'll have a very thin client there. You can run, and one of the demos that we do right now, we've got about an 8 or 10-year-old PC with 512K of RAM that basically was sitting up in our warehouse doing nothing because we had no use for it. But now, because everything's running in the cloud, all you need is Internet Explorer with a little bit of processing, because everything's really, all the heavy-duty processing is happening out in the cloud virtually. So you don't even need that strong of a box anymore. And what we're seeing now are these little appliances that are running just a little simple operating system and a browser, and that's all you need. And the same thing, phones are running over, voice over IP. Everything's running over the internet. And so you don't need a phone switch anymore. You still need a handset, but that's becoming wireless. And, who knows where these iPhones are going with us right now. I mean, pretty soon we're going to run an app on that iPhone probably, and that will be our phone, whether we're in the office, whether we're mobile, whatever. I mean, but that's where the world's going for with it.
Right. The majority of the action is actually happening out in the clouds there. And is this an accurate analogy? I long time ago had a job where we used what were called dumb. Is that kind of the same analogy, though, except it's, the computing's actually happening, on the internet?
It's happening much smarter behind the scenes now, instead of what we were doing, instead of the old green screens and now with all the GUI interfaces that we've got talking about 3D television getting ready to come out.
Right.
I mean, it's just getting more amazing every day. Unfortunately, I think our kids are going to live in a virtual world where that's all they do is, live through electronics.
And, those dumb terminals that you mentioned, it's funny, the company that built those, the Waze company, is actually alive and well making dumb terminals today, which effectively are monitors, keyboards that you plug in, and they don't compute anything locally. It's all via an internet connection, and all they do is really show you a window into your environment rather than actually being your environment.
Right.
Going back to this idea of all you need is really a screen, Microsoft has a strategy that they talk a lot about today called 3 screens in the cloud. That really, to the individual user, you have 3 screens. You have your cell phone in your pocket. You'll have your laptop, basically your business screen, and your home TV. And everything else will be in the cloud. And that is really where they see compute going, the whole human-computer experience going will be those 3 screens, and everything else will be in the cloud.
And so that adds to the mobility, again, where really if you've got your username and password, you can do whatever you need to do wherever you are.
You walk into your home, set down your cell phone, drag your Gmail account from your cell phone screen onto your home screen, onto your TV, and continue writing the email that you were writing. Except because really they're just 2 windows into the same virtual environment online.
Well, and Apple has done such a beautiful job on the user interfaces and with photography and things that a lot of us like to do at home, especially today with digital cameras and things. We've always liked the Mac. I've always thought they were a neat device, but they were never known as a business device per se. Good for doing graphics and those types of things, but not really business computing. The great thing is now with the cloud and what we do, you can bring up a window and run all your business applications out in the cloud and use it for a great business tool. But then when you shut that down and you're wanting to do your family photo album and do all the other great things that the Mac can do, you're doing that on the Mac. So you get the best of all worlds with all the business computing in the cloud, but the Mac computing there for your personal needs.
Oh, those were some good debates, though, weren't they? The BC Mac was, even besides the TV commercials. Those are some good arguments there. Well, but if the squeamish might begin to ask, though, how secure is this?
That's one of the big, Steve mentioned the 2 things that have held back what we now know as the cloud, or what's enabled the cloud. And one is the bandwidth availability, this idea that pretty much anywhere I go, I can get what we know as broadband today, realizing that will be the dial-up of the future. When we look back 10 years from now, we'll think about this concept of broadband, and it'll seem really slow. But this large pipe, if you will, to send information, and also better security, because connecting everything together without security, you just don't get any corporate buy-in. It means a lot for mom and pop with photo albums, but when you put your customer lists and your price lists out in this cloud, I want to know that no one else is accessing that. And these cloud environments have evolved to the point of security today.
So the reality of it is too. You've got Joe and Bob over there with their server sitting in their closet. First of all, probably at any time someone could walk in and walk away with it. And, and how much real security do they have around it? Some of these don't even have firewalls in front of them. They're about as insecure as you could ever get. Sure, it's sitting right there in your office, but it's the most insecure appliance you could ever have. So I argue the cloud is much more secure than probably 80% of your small and medium-sized companies. You get up in the corporate level environment where people are doing, a lot of things. But the real truth of the matter is, if someone wants in there bad enough, anyone can probably, not anyone, certain people can work hard enough and get in there if they need to.
You got BB Straight Talk. We're talking about cloud computing. We'll be right back. And we're back with BBB Straight Talk, normally with Dan Parsons, but Dan's not in today. This is Jordan Razad, the Internet Marketing Coordinator with the BBB, and we're talking about cloud computing. We have Nate Richards, President of Entrance Software, and we have Steve Winter, President and CEO of Ergos Technology. And we've kind of run the gamut or in our brief amount of time, as much as we could, all these applications, and now we wanted to kind of touch on what can these do for you? So we're just going to take a scenario of a small company, and we were kind of banding about which one to pick, but we can pick a roofer or a auto repair place, something like that. But a small company, let's say I'm the owner. I have 4 or 5 employees. I got somebody that does my books. I have a website. So how does this affect me? What can I do with this, and how can I take advantage of it?
Well, I mean, every business still has some of your basic things. I argue you want a telephone. Mm-hmm. You're going to want email for communication. You got communication tools. You've got financial needs. You've got to have an accounting system, and then some type of documentation or word processor, those types of things. All of these applications. And if you want to start to be able to share information across the workforce and those types of scenarios, then you need some type of computing. Mm-hmm. And all of the things we just talked about can all be hosted in the cloud. Mm-hmm. Your phone system, you no longer need to purchase a switch. That can all be hosted over the Internet. Your accounting system with as simple as QuickBooks Online can be out in the cloud. Word processing can be out in the cloud. And then what we're seeing more and more is when we talk about software as a service, but line of business applications to specific industries are being developed and where it's all hosted. So if, you're a roofer, if you happen to have inventory or labor or whatever it is that you're trying to track, all of these applications, if they're not there now, they're going to be there very quick where you can run everything in the cloud.
Another thing you might think of is both of those companies have to do scheduling. Mm-hmm. And you think about software that manages schedules, ticketing. If you are, I have a client that works on pipeline. They're a construction company. They've got guys out in the field working on job tickets. Traditionally, they'd get signed on paper. They would process them in paper. They would code them on paper. They would create invoices on paper. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, it would go into a computer. Right. And you're starting to see computers start to take up all of that paper process. And so now they capture data in the field using an application. It automatically generates tickets as they're automatically priced out. And those types of things are starting to get away from the paper that can be lost, burned, stained, right. Misfiled, mistyped, and getting into digital form. So mm-hmm. even these models like roofers, like auto repair shops, they've got ticketing, job tickets, tracking, that's got to feed their invoice process. So they have process. And, what's traditionally been sort of enforced by rules and people and training now is, and people mess up, they make mistakes. Whereas computers, typically, once they're right, they'll always be right or they'll always be wrong. And that's really the power of software, is to automate a lot of that manual process. And the cloud gives you this central location that's on demand, that's very low risk from it's not going to get unplugged or get rained on, right? Or have a tornado take it out. Mm-hmm. And it's low cost from a perspective of you pay for what you use. These models start to come to be very powerful even for the small business.
And so these larger companies, let's say oil companies or something like that, are they doing much different things with it, or where are they taking it? What's to their advantage with it?
Well, what they're doing, again, we talked about some of the large computational analysis and those types of things. Instead of having to build out their own infrastructure for doing this, I mean, we just talked about HP and Microsoft spending $250 million building out an infrastructure. I don't know too many companies that can spend $250 million on an infrastructure. And that computing is going to be stronger than anything anyone could ever do. And then you're using it on an as-needed basis. I mean, you've got the best of all worlds that way.
So if you have this kind of variable expenditure with building these out and shrinking them down, have CFOs been okay with that? I know they tend to like predictability, but with this new type of technology, have they been able to work with that and kind of adapt with it and roll with it?
The great thing about this cloud thing is it's so flexible. So there's typically pricing models available where if you want guaranteed compute capacity, mm-hmm. That's guaranteed when you need it, then you can sort of pay more of a monthly fee rather than a total on-demand fee. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you want to just take a risk that you need 1 million cycles and they can only sell you 500,000 right now, but 5 seconds later sell you another 1 million, there are 100% on demand versus 100% guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just really, you can work those types of things out in the pricing model,
Mm-hmm.
but the infrastructure doesn't change. And the other thing is, if you want to change pricing models, it's very easy to do.
Right. And what about the legalities, though? If, these companies depend on these applications for, pretty important things, and so now they're depending on your servers or something out there that this is living on, what do you have to write into these contracts, or what needs to be written in here so that they feel a little more comfortable about it?
Well, you've got service level agreements with everything that you're doing that guaranteeing certain uptimes and the good news is with the cloud too, we're able to build in quite a bit of redundancy into what we're doing. And so, the data isn't just sitting in one place on one server and these virtualized servers today, by nature of their definition, they're virtual. If you have an issue with a piece of hardware, you can move that virtual image of that server from one piece of hardware to another. And so you've got very, very limited downtime. Most of the companies that we deal with are professional service firms, so they're not Amazon and Google that have to be up 99.999% of the time. But the good news is today with technology, I think we're close to that in uptime.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fascinating what can be done and how fast and how good all of it is. And we're seeing data centers now that are really doing, they're thriving. And I think, especially here in the Gulf Coast, after people got hit by Hurricane Ike and all that they suffered through and really, really saw what could happen, and in New Orleans, has really helped folks and expedite them into embracing what the cloud has to offer.
But 99.99 isn't really that ridiculous now, though, is it? It's pretty far up there.
Well, you think about that as 1 out of every 10,000 minutes you're down.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe it's a couple hours a year.
So for those,
you think about that as a 4 nines type experience. But I think another thing is, in addition to where are my servers, it's also this notion of moving away from paper and into databases, which then have to live somewhere. And so, that brings the natural disaster question again, which is people say, oh, well, I'll just keep it in paper. Well,
that blows away, doesn't
it? Right. So paper burns,
or catches on fire.
It's rained on. You saw in the 9/11 attacks. downtown Manhattan covered in business paper. And they're talking about, stock trades and things. I'm like, why are these things still in paper? Why aren't life insurance policies that would never be found again?
Sure.
So a lot of businesses still keeping invoices and customer records and doctors' offices keeping patient records in paper. There are technologies and platforms out there, and the cloud allows you to mitigate not only against physical stuff burning up, but also the location. Having a data center in Houston versus Fort Worth, for example, where you don't have a hurricane issue.
So it really is a misperception for those worried about security, thinking that I have to keep everything under my roof to make sure that nobody's getting into it or is going to fool with it. It's really the wrong way to look at it. You need to have it away from you.
Well, and the other thing, too, and Nate hit on a great point, too, just everybody, if you're not doing it now, we're seeing it more and more every day is scanning. There's not hardly a piece of paper that we haven't scanned and thrown away. The only time we ever print anything really is to sit there if you want to read it or read it in your own time and not read from a screen. Sometimes it is nice to be able to like reading the newspaper, to print it off and read it. But other than that, it is stored and kept as a digital file.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not a matter of, well, we may scan one day, or we may host our servers somewhere else one day, or we may, or we might. It's really not a question of may or might. It's a question of when. 5 years from now, if we come back and do another show, it won't be about cloud strategy. It'll be, is there anything left that's not in the cloud? That will be the conversation that we have.
My cloud's better than your cloud.
Right.
Well, really.
Which cloud?
But, really, how soon are we to that? Really?
You're going to see a significant paradigm shift over the next 5 years. And it's going to be explosive, especially as the next, as Google pushes their OS out, as Microsoft pushes their next OS, as tablets come out. You're going to see Apple, Google, and Microsoft all release tablets this year. You already can see it's a multi-billion-dollar industry of netbooks. These are basically portable dumb terminals. A netbook is a laptop with very, very little compute resources, but a good ability to use the internet.
Right.
And imagine business users using netbooks. The only way to do that is to move your business infrastructure into the cloud.
Right.
Which brings up another good point of what we're trying to see around major metropolitan areas is a wireless network. Not cellular network per se, but a wireless network, so you're always connected. And so this net appliance or, whatever device, you're on the internet. And so you talk about mobility and being anywhere, anytime.
That's going to be a necessity, isn't it? Basically to have this network, this wireless network around when you have all these users.
I mean, all of the cellular providers, you can already see it. If you look at how long-distance carriers used to be per minute charging, and then they went to flat rate, and now it's not really about your phone, it's about the DSL that they connect to you.
Right.
You're going to see the same thing in the cell phone world. Rather than being about your phone, it'll be about the pipe to your pocket. It's going to be about the data, and you can already see Verizon, AT&T, Sprint.
Yep.
It's going to be all about the data plan, and you can use as many voice minutes as you want.
Got BBB Straight Talk. We're talking about cloud computing. Got Steve Winter, President and CEO of Ergos Technologies, and Nate Richards, President of Entrance Software, and we'll be right back.
And bearing in mind all the ones.
We're back with BBB Straight Talk. I'm Jordan Razad, the Internet Marketing Coordinator with the BBB here in Houston. And we've been talking about cloud computing with Steve Winter, President and CEO of Ergos Technology, and Nate Richards, President of Entrance Software. The coming schedule here for our shows on the 18th, today is the 18th. On the 25th, we'll be talking about Medicare fraud with Barbara McGinnity. She's the program director for the BBB Education Foundation. And then on the 1st, we're going to be talking about workplace safety. We'll have Stuart Records from Innotech and his partner Chad Roble, and most likely someone from OSHA too. And we're going to be talking about the new administration and the changes in workplace safety. And so now let's go, Steve. How can we find your company? How do we get a hold of you?
Real simple. It's ergos.com, just www.ergos.com. And my email, steve-winter@ergos.com. But simply, if you have any questions or want any answers, you can go to info@ergos.com, send us an email, and we're happy to respond back to you.
All right.
We also have a lot of cars running around this town that have flat fee, worry-free IT on them, little Scions that are running around. So you'll see us that way, too.
All right, looking for them. Nate?
So you can find us on our website at www.entrancesoftware.com. That's ENTRANCE software.com. And I'll be posting a blog entry about cloud computing today on our blog, which you can link to from our homepage. And you can find us on Twitter at Custom Software.
All right, and I should also remind everyone that the BBB does have a Twitter page, too. You can find us at BBB_Houston. It's BBB_Houston, and maybe in the future, as we have different guests on, we'll be taking some questions over Twitter. We'll see how that works out. And so either one of you, just off the top of your head, is there anything coming that just is kind of going to blow our minds? Is there anything that we should look for that's just going to really amaze us?
I mean, cell phone technology, screens are getting bigger.
Mobile.
Phones are getting thinner, more lightweight, more high-powered.
3D television.
I'm personally looking forward to that. Another excuse to sit on the couch. But what about as far as in a business sense too? Is there going to be something that let's say that is it what Salesforce is doing or where they're going or partnerships? Any new partnerships that you're seeing or have heard about?
I mean, I think you're going to see businesses embracing the mobile space. It won't just be BlackBerry and email. It'll be every business will have an iPhone app. It'll be how you reach and connect with your customers. Not just iPhone. It'll be BlackBerry apps, Palm apps, Microsoft apps. But the mobile to mobile connection will be how you touch your customer.
The mobile experience will be your business experience, too.
Great. I think it sounds exciting. Steve Winter and Nate Richards, thank you guys so much for being on. It was a lot of great information, and we got BBB Straight Talk. See you next time.
Thank you.
The BBB is a nonprofit association of accredited businesses that promote ethics and trust in the marketplace. All businesses that are participants or sponsors on this show meet the standards of BBB accreditation. For a full listing of accredited businesses, please go to www.bbbhouston.org. bbhouston.org. 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 bbhouston.org.